How do I know God's will for my life? Well, that is a question that I asked myself for many, many years. And it took a while before I really understood what it means to know God's will for my life. So it started with me when I started following Jesus. God delivered me from alcohol, my addiction to alcohol, miraculously the night that I turned my life over to God. But I didn't get over the other habits so easily. These habits were inbred within me because I had been doing them so long. They had become a part of who I was. So as I began to tackle them, so to speak, I began to work on overcoming them. It became easier and easier. One of the first problems that I wanted to give up, the habit that I wanted to give up, was tobacco. And I can remember I used to smoke pipes, I smoked cigars, I smoked cigarettes. I just loved to smoke. And I had a collection of pipes, and I had cigars, and I had a certain kind of cigarette that I loved to smoke. And I was sitting there one day in my home, and a pastor knocked on the door, and I had no idea he was going to be coming to my house. And I was smoking a pipe at the time, and I had the pipe in my hand, and I opened the door, and there was my pastor. And I just had this feeling inside of me that what I'm doing is wrong. And when I saw him, this conviction came over me. I was embarrassed. So I decided after he left that I really needed to do something about the smoking. And I made an appointment to go in and talk to him, and fortunately, he was wide open to visit with me and talk to me. So as we visited, I told him about my problem with tobacco. And he said, well, Bob, I had that same problem when I started following the Lord. And I was addicted to cigarettes, and I just could not quit. But I found a way to do it that might help you. So he said, what I did, instead of the cigarettes, I put a small pocket New Testament where I had my cigarettes. And every time I had a desire to smoke, he said, I would stop and I would say to myself, I'm not going to smoke for 30 minutes, but instead I'm going to read some scripture. So he pulled out his New Testament and he began to read, and the urge to smoke left him for a while, and he went on. And the next time the urge came, he just repeated that. And he did that over and over again until he said he didn't have any more temptation. And I thought, wow, that sounds pretty simple. I think I'm going to try that. So then a couple days later, I made a decision to put a New Testament in my pocket in place of the cigarettes and to try. Now, I took the cigarettes along and I had them at work, but I decided I'm going to do this at work. And so that's what happened. And I'd get a desire to smoke, and I would lay it down, and I would then pick up the New Testament out of my pocket where the cigarettes had been. And the next thing you know, I'm reading scripture, and the desire for that went away temporarily, because later, 30 minutes later, it came back. Well, I did that. And the period of time between the reading of Scripture and the next temptation kept getting further and further apart, until several weeks later, I was able to go for forever without having that need to have a cigarette. And that is how I overcame my tobacco problem. Similarly, it worked for other temptations that I've had, and some of the temptations came back numerous times many years later. But each time, by putting Christ first and by overcoming that temptation, by having within my heart a greater desire than the temptation that was trying to get a hold of me, by putting the desire for God in front of that, I was able to overcome. And that's helped me with every other temptation that I have had to deal with.